Well, let's make sure everything's working. And you folks out there, I am on the road traveling. So if you'd be so kind as to let me know if the sound is okay. Looks like you're already here. And I can see the videos okay. So we'll just get started. And like I said, if there's anything with the sound that's a problem, please let me know. Okay, I'd appreciate it very much. So we'll see if anybody's going to hearing good. Okay, we'll just take it from there and just figure that everybody's going to be just fine. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've done a formal presentation for a lot of reasons, as most of you know. I'm tired of saying the same thing over and over again and no action being taken. I'm not here today to talk about all of the events in the last couple of weeks with the shutdown and the all the things with the Covington deal and all of that. I think you already know how I feel about that. I have put up some live streams in the last few days addressing those issues, so we're really not going to go there today. I will just reiterate that I've been saying all along that Trump needs to act, and it's just looking like more and more that he is never going to, he hasn't set up his administration in order to go after the criminals and the traitors in our own government. And they are still harassing American citizens just like they're harassing him and his close associates. And they've been doing this for a long time. It's nothing new. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. If you look in the description box, we're basically going to talk about FBI and DOJ corruption. You know, I did a whole series on that. It's in my playlist. I've had a lot of experience in this over, 30-year period or longer. And, both personal and professional. And I keep hearing a lot of mainstream and alternative media people say that, it's only the upper echelons of the FBI that are corrupt, that the rank and file is not. I want to categorically deny that. That is not true. It has permeated the entire DOJ and FBI, and we're seeing that again today, as a matter of fact, on some things that we're going to cover today that actually broke this morning, which kind of propelled us into wanting to do this. I didn't plan this out initially. And I'm going to turn on a light here just a little. It looks like we're getting some shadow. But I did want to cover these issues today, and thanks to Brand Thornton for being here. Let me give you a little background about Brand. He's been on a number of my videos for a long time. We've actually known each other since about 1979. That's showing our age, I'm afraid. So any of the young ladies out there that might be aspiring to that, you got to take that into consideration. We were both. I had been converted to the Mormon Church. So had Brand at one time in our younger years, and over the course of years, we found out some things about that organization and institution that disturbed us. And for merely asking questions, they censored us, they disfellowshipped us, and eventually, in Brand's case, they excommunicated him for telling about a dream that he had that came true. And in my case, they excommunicated me after they knew about it for about a year and a half for my multiple marriage situation. And most of you should know about that. We're not going to go there either. The point is that we've been very active in talking about the corruption in institutions, both governmental and religious, and of course corporate, for a long time. I was in the military. I was in the police, in a police department. I've been very closely associated with these things. I know what I've seen. I understand what's happened. And Brand, on the other hand, he's been basically in private contracting for the most part, running his own businesses, things like that. But what's occurred and why we got pushed over into this, wanting to do this today. First of all, and he's going to mention a little bit about it, this is the anniversary of LaVoy Finicum's murder in the Malheur. Well, actually, he was on his way up to another meeting north of there. I forget the name of the place.
It was Grant County.
Okay, Grant County. And they couldn't have that virus of the Constitution spreading, so, of course, you know the story. LaVoy Finicum was unarmed. They claimed that he was armed, but he was not. And they shot him down in cold blood. It was a murder, and just like the Randy Weaver situation, very, very similar. So at any rate, we wanted to give that shout out today, and I'm sure Brian will cover it a little bit more. And then in addition to that, I wanted to make sure that we understand that the corruption and the criminality that we've seen in the DOJ and the FBI with this whole Russiagate thing and the way that they're misusing their authority and the police state tactics, really the Soviet tactics that they're using. Can you believe this is happening in the United States? Well, let me tell you, if you haven't gotten the information before, which I've talked about, what's happening to Trump and his associates now has been happening to the American people for decades, okay? Mm-hmm. Not just President Kennedy, not just President Kennedy, but individual citizens who have been denied their right to life and the pursuit of happiness, and their God-given rights interfered with that are supposed to be protected by the very people that take it from them, which is, of course, the federal government, by and large, law enforcement. I can be critical of law enforcement because I was one. I was in the military police corps in the Army, and I was also a municipal policeman. So I've had a lot of experience. I've seen a lot of things, and I can be critical of that when I see it. But again, we don't want to spend a lot of time there. What we really want to talk about today is the ongoing DOJ, FBI corruption, and particularly in the Bundy case, what happened there. We're not going to tell you the whole story of the Bundy case again. What we are going to do is focus in on what happened, primarily how they set the case up, first of all, how they entrapped people or encouraged them to do things that could be considered criminal even if not, but they could spin it that way. And then also during the trials, how the DOJ and the FBI hid exculpatory evidence. That means evidence that would prove the innocence of the defendants, okay, or at least mitigate the circumstances that the government was promoting. So that's really our purpose here today, and Brand is going to be the one that pretty much carries this. I'll ask him some specific questions, and we'll try to open up the chat so that you can ask specific questions. I'm not going to watch it closely here unless I see a question that's really, really important. Let me show you a couple of pictures first. You may remember these. This was Brand. If you remember this picture, it was taken by, I think it was the
Channel 8.
Yeah, it was taken by one of the news organizations. This is Brand. When Brand and I first decided to go to Bundy Ranch, nothing had really happened. There had been sniper teams by the BLM sent out there. They were harassing. They beat up a couple of the Davy Bundy, and had threatened the women and children who were merely at picnic tables. And of course, they had shut down the whole area so that people couldn't go out there and enjoy, the whole land there. I mean, even people that were touring, couldn't use the land there because they had it all closed down, supposedly because of the tortoise, which was all a cover story. And again, I don't want to get in too deep there, but Brandon and I decided to go out there. We've been very, spiritually oriented all of our lives, and studying Hebrew and ancient Israelite rituals and things like that. And so our real purpose in going out there was to bless the people in their efforts, and we actually did that. That's what we did, and that was our whole purpose when we went out there. And then we saw the other things happen. Well, in this picture here, you can see Brand blowing the shofar at the demonstration area. But at any rate, the thing escalated the next day after we went out there to do this blessing. We stayed that night, we camped out, and the next day we were just visiting with people, talking to them about what's happening. And that's when the big convoy came down from the mountain. They had a backhoe up there, and they were destroying the ranchers' improvements, their watering facilities, things like that, which they had every right to have. Unfortunately, the federal government had acted upon the whole thing with the Green Movement and the EPA and the UN requirements and those types of things, which should never have happened here. But the Bundys, and I don't want to get into a legal discussion, they had rights over that land that dated back over 100 years. And the BLM had tried to force them into accepting the new rules, and they said, no, we don't want to contract with you to do that. And so, anyway, it shut down all the other ranchers in the area, and the Bundys held out. But so the next day, as I said, this convoy is coming down, and the backhoe had destroyed. It was obvious that it had been up there, and why? What was the purpose? That's the first thing everybody asks: why is that? Why is that earth moving equipment up there? And they were protecting it with a huge convoy. I think I counted 22 BLM vehicles, something like that. They had dogs. They were armed with military equipment, and the people, it was a very small demonstration at that point, but they all went up to where the convoy was coming down off the mountain to say, hey, stop, this isn't right, because they had tried to keep the people in a First Amendment area, small, I think it was 50-foot square or something like that over by I-15. And of course that was unconstitutional and illegal on the BLM's part as well. So at any rate, an altercation occurred there. The convoy didn't have to stop. Now, I do know that Pete Santilli did apparently pull in front. He's a radio talk show host. He apparently did use his car to pull in front of the truck that was pulling the earth-moving equipment. But he moved it back. Mm-hmm. But the entire BLM dismounted, brought out their dogs. So this very small group of people. And you can go in the description box below is my link to my playlist on the Bundy situation. It's not complete, but I think there's something like 20 videos there, and you can watch the history as it unfolded. I was right there with Brand, so we're both very well versed in what was occurring there. The people had no intention of being violent at all. As a matter of fact, the security that the Bundys had set up had actually asked several people who appeared to be a problem to leave, so they were policing themselves. They had no intention of confronting the BLM, and I will just say for the record, and then we won't go back to it, that when Sheriff Gillespie did say that the cattle were going to be released, the people went over there to be with the cattle as they were released. But unfortunately, it was a setup by both the DOJ and the FBI, again, to make a non-criminal event look like it was criminal intent, and it was not. I was there. I know what happened. Sheriff Gillespie is responsible for a lot of this, as is the current Sheriff Lombardo, who was there on site as well. And it was a corrupted FBI, DOJ that set this thing up and BLM to basically steal the land and these ranchers' rights, and all the people who went there to support the Bundys in this demonstration against this usurpation of our rights. So this picture of Brand I wanted you to see so that you can see him. I think that's on day 3, I think, something like that. That picture was taken. Yeah. And it showed that is a shofar there. It shows that we are there primarily for religious, spiritual reasons, but a lot of people were carrying weapons because they want, and this isn't at the corrals, this is at the demonstration area, so this is perfectly lawful there, Second Amendment, exercising Second Amendment rights. But one of the big reasons for people being there is you have organizations, you have events like this, and it draws criminals. And of course it did. That couple that went there and tried to, I forget their name right now, but they did cause some problems. The security folks did tell them to leave.
Miller.
The Millers, yeah. And then they went into Las Vegas and they shot a police officer there, two of them, and went into the Walmart. I think you'll remember that. But it's people like that you got to look out for. And so it's only right that especially in this area of the country, out in the middle of the desert, So anyway, that was the primary reason for that situation there. The other one that I wanted to show you, and I'm going to let Brand take this over, is this one here. This is very important because when Brand has been very active. He was there at Bundy Ranch, as I've said. He was also at Malheur up in Oregon during the Hammond situation, if you remember what that was, and I won't go into a lot of detail about it. But this is a very interesting photograph here. This was sent to him by a friend of his that thought that he should know about it, and I'm just going to give a little background on it. It was very obvious, and I think this is the first time I've said this publicly. While I was there, the FBI, with the help of certain media people, tried to set me up into. They were trying to see if I had actually been responsible for setting up this entire thing. Okay, which I hadn't been. As I said, we went there, to go in our tallits and our shofars and things to bless the people. We had not had any contact as far as planning or anything like that. I hadn't talked to any of them, as a matter of fact, prior to that. I met them for the first time on the day that we went and did the blessing down by the river. But at any rate, they definitely tried to set me up, and I know the person's responsible for that, and it's really disgusting what they tried to do. I won't go into the details, but they tried to basically get me to say that I was in charge, and then put me in charge of the situation at the corrals. Now, this is very important because these two guys met me, again, with the introduction of a media personnel, which I'm not going to name right now, but set me up with these two guys who were obviously federal agents of some sort. And they tried to convince me, this is again before the corral situation took place over by I-15, tried to get me to lead the people over there in a nonviolent, unarmed demonstration and just lay down and make them come and move us. Well, of course, it never work out that way under the situation. And I wasn't in charge anyway. As I told these two, I'm going to call them men, I'm not certain they were gentlemen, but I told them, I said, look, this is the Bundy show. This isn't my show. This isn't this media personality show. This is the Bundy's thing. I'm here to support them. I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm leading nothing.
Can I underscore real quick?
Yes, please.
For those that don't know, there was a Longbow Production, a production company, which was nothing more than an FBI front. And they interviewed quite a few of us, and which ultimately led to some one conviction at least. And but anyhow, I actually got interviewed by Longbow Productions also. And the first two things out of their mouth, the first person they asked me about, what did I know about Pete Santilli? Well, I just met Pete Santilli. I really didn't know anything about him. I'd been on his talk show a few times, and But that was the first time I met him in person. I really didn't know that much about him. The second thing out of their mouths they asked me about was Lieutenant Colonel Roy Potter. And specifically, how much did he have to do with the planning of this whole event? Well, I really shocked him what I said. And I don't know if you can delete, but I remember Roy came back and he said, this is a cluster. And nobody has a clue as what they're doing. So, but I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and we could go into more depth about how they were trying to set up people there, but again, I'm not going to cover that. I want Brand to. But getting back to this one photograph, the reason why we talked about those two stories here is because this photograph was taken at the corral areas on I-15 on the day of the actual standoff, when the people had been told that the cattle were going to be released. They went over there, and what they met was a military confrontation, an army of military weapons and people that had known from that morning, at least, that this was going to be a deliberate confrontation with the ranchers. There was an observation post up on Mormon Mesa that was armed with sniper equipment, and the same thing we found in several other areas. They wanted to kill American citizens who were there believing that the sheriff, as the sheriff had said, that the cattle were going to be released. This was a setup. Okay, yeah. So we went there, and they caused some violence before the BLM, and now here we are. And we found out later, as Brand will talk about, that the FBI and the DOJ were manipulating this thing from the very start, even prior to the confrontation on that first day where the convoy came down off the mountain, which they may have actually set up as well. This picture I wanted to show it to you because Brand has been accused of being an FBI informant. Now, again, I've known Brand for
38 years.
A long time. Intimately, no, not not in this actual case. But as far as our families and what we've done, who we are, and a lot of people say, "Well, Roy, you're with the deep state." Well, okay, fine. The point is that I can attest the fact to those who will listen to me that Brand is not an FBI informant. But what they tried to do is set him up. You remember Randy Weaver, right? Well, Randy Weaver was they tried to set him up by doing something to him that would make him want to, help them out by either a false accusation, a false charge, or whatever. And of course, they ended up using a friend of his to saw a shotgun like a quarter-inch too short. And that's what they went after him on to try to press him. But at any rate, this is exactly what happened in this. This is, I believe, an FBI photograph, is it?
Yeah, that came out in Discovery during the trials here in Las Vegas like a year ago. That came out in Discovery. And you see Greg Whalen there. He's a good friend of mine. He's actually one that posted it. I saw it on his page. That was when I first saw
here? That looks like Lombardo, actually, right there.
And it's Greg.
Okay, that's
Greg's right there. Greg's right there.
That's Greg,
yeah.
Okay.
So, there were certain people that, saw that. And
let me explain this, Brand. This is Brand Thornton right here, where you see the pointer. And look what they did here. They didn't put his name in there, Brand Thornton. They put in redacted. Mm-hmm. This was done on purpose to make it look like that he's an FBI informant. The FBI was going to try to use him to leverage things, and that's come out later. They gave up on me, but because I was too close to the federal government for a long time. I know how they operate. They pretty much know my history. But Brand was somewhat of a mystery to them. They thought they could turn him. So this is what they did. They put this photograph out with Brand here. Didn't put his name, Brand Thornton, but said redacted. So then they did this on purpose so that Brand could be accused and embarrassed, and they could manipulate him. Go ahead, Brand.
Well, the reason I'm even there with Metro is when I got up there, I actually went up there with that sheriff from New Mexico. I don't recall his name offhand. I jumped in his vehicle with him, and I drove up there with him, and we couldn't get to that area because the traffic had stopped, and so I jumped out and actually took off running because for what I saw was nothing like the sheriff said. Sheriff Gillespie said that the cattle are going to be released, and so when we get up there and I see all these MRAPs, Metro Police Department MRAPs, I was like, what?
And an Apache helicopter.
Yeah, there's all this militarization.
Right.
And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, there's something wrong here.
And I can interject here, Brand, while you all are looking at this picture. Remember, the sheriff said they were going to release the cattle, so that should have ended all the problems that day. Why was the BLM and the FBI, I might add, all fitted out, with battle rattle? And having they had paddy wagons there, they had these MRAPs, as Brand was just saying. In other words, if you were going to release the cattle and de-escalate the situation, why would you have all that? No, this all proves that they were going to try to cause a 9/11 event. That's what was happening. Go ahead.
Well, and Gillespie also said the Gold Butte unit was open. It was open.
Right.
There were no more First Amendment zones, and he come right out and said that people could enjoy this, do whatever they wanted. So, but then when I get there, I'm looking at something totally different. And I actually had went over there and talked to an officer, Tom Jenkins.
That's him right there.
Actually, no.
That's not him?
No,
Okay.
Tom Jenkins is just a really little old guy.
Okay, sorry.
And I actually talked to a couple of officers before. I wanted to explain, or actually really wanted to find out what was going on and see if they could explain it. And I was going to explain our position, and they said, well, hang on, we'll get our superior, and I ended up talking to Officer Tom Jenkins, and it was just a real short and brief. I knew everybody was committed. There's a lot that was going on behind the scenes that you don't see there, that you never did see there. But there was a commitment to recover those cattle, and that's what I conveyed that message to Officer Tom Jenkins, that maybe I embellished it a little bit, but I said there's 500 heavily armed people here, and we're going to take the cattle. And his quote unquote is not going to happen. So that shows
when the sheriff had already said it was. So who's this guy?
There's a major disconnect right there. And I just looked him in the eye and I said, good luck. I shook his hand and I turned around and walked back. And I ended up walking back with Metro. And
that shows it right
Lombardo was in there, and Sheriff Officer Tom Roberts.
Yeah, Tom Roberts
was
right.
there. Mm-hmm. Which is interesting, but Sheriff...
So he's right there with Metro officers, right there. Yeah. There's Brand, and here are all these Metro officers.
And just prior to that, there's probably 20 armed people that you can't really see, but behind those concrete Jersey barriers and then some vehicles, they had actually taken up positions. And I had gone over and talked to them prior to that. And because there was some banter that was going back and forth between a highway patrolman, a trooper, and it was getting pretty bad. And I went and talked to them, and I said, "Cut it out. Just stop it right now."
And some of these armed people were probably provocateurs,
could be
because of the way this thing had been set up. But anyway, go ahead.
So anyhow, that is where that picture originated from. And during the trial, that came out. It was in discovery. And when I saw it, I was like kind of mortified. It's like, man, I could see exactly what somebody's trying to do there. And there's certain people that took it and ran with it, attached themselves to it. One was Mark West. I'll mention his name. I think he was probably one of the biggest ones that, quote unquote, he told me I had been exposed. So, but there was other people too that attached themselves to that picture, amongst other things, and trying to say that I was an FBI informant. I like what MD Lauder said about that. Brand, he's not smart enough to work for the federal.
MD Lauder said, and you can explain who she is, but she said when this all came out, she said, Brand, you're not smart enough to be an FBI agent or informant. You didn't go to college. You didn't of course, they don't use necessarily college people to be informants. But anyway, I think the comment is correct. Not that you're dumb, but you have to have at least some training of some sort. So.
Yeah. So anyhow, one of the things as Roy previously mentioned, this is a 3-year anniversary of the murder of LaVoy Finicum. I had the great pleasure.
They cut us off, Brand.
Oh, did they really?
Let me warn you that as good as the connection is here, that YouTube has apparently cut the feed for the video. Are you all seeing it at all? Let me see what we've got here. It's very bad. It says YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. As such, viewers will experience buffering. The signal here is very good, so I can't explain what's happening, but hopefully the audio will stay up. And I apologize for any inconvenience on that, ladies and gentlemen. But there's not much I can do. So it's probably being manipulated somewhere else. All right, it's clear here. Okay, well, we'll keep going. Hopefully it'll improve. Anyway, I'm going to let Brand kind of take it from here. And again, we're going to concentrate on the corruption that occurred both at the Malheur trials, how they set that up, what the DOJ and the FBI did there, and also what happened subsequently at the Bundy trials. And that's really what we're about. Keeping in mind that the FBI, DOJ corruption that we're seeing today against President Trump and his associates is nothing new, and that if they'll do it against them, they'll do it against normal Americans, like in fact they have. And I also want to say real quick before I hand it over to Brand completely, that it came out today, they tried this once before, the prosecutors in the Bundy trial are now asking the Court of Appeals, we're figuring it's the Ninth Circuit, to reverse Judge Navarro's dismissal against the Bundys. You see, they never give up. Government can never be held accountable, can never be wrong. Back in my day when I was a cop under Title 18, if a cop violated somebody's civil rights, not only was the department liable, but so was the officer personally, okay? Then they sent out this immunity for them, and that's no longer the case, and that's wrong, because then they act with impunity as they are. So again, what's happened today, another reason why we're doing this, is that the prosecutors in the Bundy case are challenging Judge Navarro's dismissal against the Bundys and want the appellate court to reinstitute the charges against them so that they can go forward. And this is totally corrupt criminal behavior on their part. All of those prosecutors that engaged in covering up the exculpatory evidence, which Brandon is going to discuss a little bit here, should have been charged criminally, because that's what they're subject to if things were correct. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to run and do some things, and I'm going to hand this over to Brand, and hopefully the it keeps going.
Well,
here.
some people are saying they can see us still.
Yeah, this is just so you know.
Okay.
If this is yellow, it means it's okay. If it turns red, it means the video has stopped. But
It's orange.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right, I'm colorblind. All right. But at any rate, the audio should continue regardless. So go ahead.
Going back to LaVoy Finicum, like I said, it's a 3-year anniversary of the man. I had the great pleasure of spending approximately a month with LaVoy up there in Oregon, the Malheur Refuge, Burns, Oregon, and I got to talk to him on a fairly regular basis. He was such an impressive, wonderful man. I can remember so many wonderful things about him, and he was very peaceful. He's been painted with this brush that he was dangerous and potentially a violent man. Well, we had meetings twice a day at the refuge, and I don't know how many times I heard him say that this is a peaceful demonstration. And he would even say, keep your firearms hidden, all right? And you don't point them at anybody. You don't fire at anybody unless you're fired upon. And so he was a very peaceful man. He wasn't violent or dangerous in any way. He was a loving man. I mean, many times I'd see him hugging people. He would give me hugs from time to time, and actually told me how much he loved me. So he's just a wonderful man. Another thing that a lot of people don't know is that he was one of the riders at the Bundy standoff. He was one of the people that rode the horses up to the BLM compound, and he was very, very stately on that horse. I mean, to me, he was a man's man and a cowboy's man. He just fit the description perfectly, the way he talked, everything. So having mentioned that, talking about the FBI and the lack of due process, well, LaVoy didn't get the opportunity to be tried like the rest of the Patriots and the Bundys up there in Oregon. And he would have been found not guilty. So he was denied his due process. He was denied his life, murdered in cold blood. And so that is just one small thing regarding the DOJ and the FBI and the corruption there. As Roy said, I sat through these trials. I spent a lot of time in Oregon during the trials. I testified a couple of times there. I would have testified the third time, but I was actually talked into pleading the fifth by Jason Patrick and his attorney and a court-appointed attorney. I had no intentions of pleading the fifth, but I was told that I was actually going to hurt their case if I got on the stand. Well, that's the last thing I want to do, and so I didn't. And I caught some flack from that, from different people, but it just goes to show how events turn from time to time. There was exculpatory evidence, I believe, that was denied the defense up there in Oregon, but nothing like what took place in Las Vegas. I mean, we looked at Anna J. Brown and was like, where the heck did this woman come from? And then we get down to Las Vegas.
That was the judge in Oregon.
Yes, that was a judge in Oregon. Then we get here in Las Vegas was Judge Gloria Navarro. And I mean, unbelievable difference. Anna J. Brown compared to Gloria Navarro was actually fair. And I use that term loosely, but Gloria Navarro was unbelievable. She would make comments like, right from the bench, she would make comments like, to the jury, at any time you are exercising your First Amendment right, at the same time you're exercising your Second Amendment right, and any law enforcement officer sees your firearm, you have assaulted that officer. Right from the bench, she said that, and it wasn't once. She said it over a period of days. Mm-hmm. We had all kinds of witnesses.
And I might interject here. I said I wouldn't do this, but I think that's probably why they're trying to reopen the case, because All of this is supporting all of those people, constitutionalists, that are saying, do not throw Trump out of office without due process. In other words, okay, no coup. So they want to have a reason that they can go back on a precedent, another one, so that Trump can't have the support that he certainly deserves from the citizens. And again, if you've seen my posts in the last few days, I'm very upset with the way Trump has failed to act. Yeah. So I'm not standing up for him without, also realizing there are some problems and serious problems. But go ahead, Brandon.
Well, we had kind of a pipeline to the information that the defense had. And I'm not going to mention a bunch of names because I don't know what that could lead to. But there was three of us, myself, John Lamb, and Kelly Stewart, that we were actually getting information via one particular individual that was helping with the defense. And so we were very aware of the frustrations of the defense because they had all of this evidence, exculpatory evidence, and the courts was not letting them bring it out. I mean, you sit there and you just be anticipating this particular evidence is going to come out in trial now, and boom, either the prosecution or the judge would stop it dead in its tracks. And it happened over and over and over again. And it was extremely frustrating. Now, ultimately, it did get dismissed with prejudice. And we thought it was a good thing that Gloria Navarro finally did. But after talking to members of the defense and Cliven Bundy, I talked to Cliven Bundy personally, and he said, we were that close to bringing out evidence that would have destroyed the BLM, the forestry, all of them, the prosecution. There was things that...
So they didn't do it because of some justice on Navarro's.
Exactly.
They did it because they realized that with the second letter from Wooten, that was the BLM agent who actually gave the information that this was all he didn't call it a criminal, but there was evidence that he exposed that showed that this thing was a really bad deal. Well, and with the second letter that was still set to come out, that would have devastated. I think that's what. Well,
the jury never did hear Larry Wooten Memo 1. Okay, they never did hear that.
Right.
That in itself would have just totally exonerated the defendants. But what they were very concerned about is Larry Wooten Memo 2.
Right.
Now, that was the one they absolutely could not let the public know about.
Right.
So it had nothing to do.
And that's the sources and methods that they're always trying to protect. Is their wrongdoing. When they say sources and methods, it's not to keep agents alive in the field or how they obtain information. I mean, that is true. But when they claim that to keep from giving information about their misconduct, you can bet that what they're talking about is, in fact, misconduct.
And I'll say right now, I don't believe there's going to be another trial because this information would come out. I think unless they really resort to some horrible tactics. Now, one weekend, Pete Santilli and his base there raised $10,000 to depose Larry Wooten. And so what happened is Judge Gloria Navarro put the kibosh on that. We raised the money, it got to the attorney, and she would not allow him to be deposed. So that information has never, ever come out. And it is now, this much I will say, I have contacts with Todd Engel through some of his people, and I have talked to them. And they told me, the attorney for Todd Engel saw Larry Wooten Memo number 2, and he came out with a statement that it was, compared to Larry Wooten Memo 1, it would be nuclear. That's a quote, or two quotes, and it'd make Larry Wooten Memo 1 look like a picnic. Now, that attorney actually had the FBI show up at his house. They were going to arrest him for disclosing information out of that, which he never did.
He never did.
He just
talked
made
about it in
those
very
two
general terms.
Yeah,
Right.
he just made those two comments.
Was he ever told that he couldn't talk about it in general terms?
That I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, look, that's exactly what, in some regards, what they're doing to Roger Stone today, and yesterday. That's exactly, they bend things, and they about parallel construction, about how they'll put a person in a situation who has no intent of committing a crime, but then they can interpolate the crime to them, even though they had no intent to do it. And yet on Hillary Clinton's part, of course, sorry, I'm getting off track, but this is important, because you heard Comey say, well, yeah, she did this and she did this and she did this, and yeah, she mishandled classified information, but there was no intent, no prosecutors. Wait a minute. In that situation, the statute is very clear. You don't even have to have an intent. Just the fact that you mishandled the classified information is in and of itself sufficient cause to have charged her. So when you have somebody like Hillary Clinton who had an intent to commit a crime, they cover it up. When you have people that are trying to stand up for their rights and have no intent to commit a crime, they interpolate an intent in there when none exists. So I just
a couple of things that I really believe are in Larry Wooten Memo 2, and you and I both talked about this, because the kill list, the two kill lists that came out, Larry Wooten Memo number 1, one was Dan Love's people that had committed suicide under his watch, more or less. But there was the other one, which had people that were marked to be killed.
Right.
Which were Mormons and
you were like number 25 on that
25,
list, right?
Yeah, and Mormons and Mormon supporters. Okay, so what I truly believe is in Larry Wooten Memo 2 is who came up with that kill list. And that is one of the things I've been just dying to hear about, and you and I both know why.
Well, I'm going to say it. The Mormons have a thing called blood atonement. And the Mormon leadership, you don't want to say it, I will.
Okay.
The blood atonement thing, the Mormon leadership has very close associations with the federal government. Now, when LaVoy and these people, including the Bundys, anybody associated with the Mormon church in any way, stood up the way they did, the leaders in the Mormon church, and a lot of Mormons out there are not going to like this, but I'm sorry, like I said, I'm not saying this out of just vindictiveness. It's experience. Okay, what those guys did was embarrass the church. They become enemies of the church, and yes, they do go on first of all on an altar in the upper room of the temple, where they have two scrolls or two lists. One is for those who need blessings, and the other is for cursings. And all of those people were put on that cursing list, which also means that they can be blood atoned, even if the church isn't engaging in that. What they do is they will help the federal government to obtain information so that they can conduct, like the murder on LaVoy Finicum. So yes, it does happen. So that's probably, and a lot of FBI agents are associated with the Mormon Church, and I can tell you a whole lot about that. I'm not going to. CIA as well. But at any rate, the point is that this kill list was probably partially, if not wholly, obtained from the upper offices of 47 East South Temple.
And I think it's worthy to be mentioned that Steve Myrie, prosecuting attorney, is LDS. He's a Mormon. Mm-hmm. I think it's worth mentioning that Dan Sheese, prosecuting attorney, is a Mormon.
What about Dan Love?
I don't know about Dan
Special
Love.
Agent in charge Dan Love was also LDS.
Okay. And this other thing I'm going to mention, I just think I got to mention it. I'm not going to point a finger at him. But the defense attorney, Whipple, is also LDS. And I just got a feeling that nobody wanted this to come out. I got a very strong feeling about it. And
so even the defense at that point would probably say, we don't want to go there.
We don't want to go down that road.
Don't they take an oath in the Mormon church when they go to the temple that they will do everything to build up the church and kingdom of God? So in other words, they can't do anything to violate that oath. Mm-hmm. It's very similar to a Jesuit oath, right?
Yeah, and you know what? But they also take, and you and I both been through the temple.
Right.
So they also take another oath, though, and is your anointings and washings.
Right.
And your arms and hands are anointed and washed to wield the sword in defense of the truth.
Yeah, the sword of justice in defense of truth and virtue. Yes, that's very true. However, they twist around that by saying, well, what's truth and virtue is doing what the church leadership tells you. Anyway, I didn't really want to get off on that, but the Mormon connection is important.
It is.
Because the Bundys were LDS. A lot of people that were there were LDS or had been affiliated with the Mormon church, and so this kill list could very well have been a blood atonement agreement between the feds and the LDS.
And I agree with Cliven. Cliven, when he was in prison, he asked, where is the priesthood? Where are the members of the church? They said he was 700 days out there, denied due process, denied bail, without any support, hardly at all, from his church. And even Ammon Bundy later came out, and he called it the war of the high priest, or the battle of the high priest. And he brought out a whole bunch of things that these, like Steve Myrie was a high priest, Ammon Bundy's a high priest in the Mormon Church, and there's so many of them, and they're on opposite sides of this whole issue. Okay, Ammon Bundy is a true patriot. Cliven Bundy is a true patriot. They understand the Constitution of the United States. Ryan Bundy, all the Bundys are patriots and constitutionalists, and in my very strong opinion, they understand the Constitution as well, or is better than anybody. And so then you're being persecuted by high priest in the church, Dan Shees, high priest. Okay, amazing. This is really an amazing paradigm. It's mind-boggling when we get right down to it.
And not just that they did that, but they purposely denied them. Not that they, if you're in the church and somebody does something wrong, you need to do your duty as far as prosecuting somebody that's committed a crime. The problem was they knew the exculpatory evidence that would have released these people, and they didn't. They didn't bring that out, and that's the problem. So, in other words, it's corruption and criminality.
And they're still hiding evidence that, if it came out, would be devastating to the Department of Interior. And I've reached a point I don't think it's ever going to come out now. I would like to see, for example, Ryan Bundy represented himself as an attorney, and I would like to see Ryan actually demand Larry Wooten Memo 2. And also, Ryan Bundy still got that bullet in his shoulder.
Right.
That is strong evidence.
Well, they beat him up when he was saying, "Hey," and they beat him up in the jail because they didn't want him to talk about it.
Well, they rousted him up one night in the middle of the night
when
he was asleep. Yeah, they eventually took him to 3 different doctors to try and get it removed. And what's interesting, this is your state police that are doing this, so they're in cahoots with the federal government, the FBI, because that's who really wanted that bullet and destroy that evidence. Well, maybe the state police too, because it could be a state police bullet. The state police were shooting 223
Well, once
rounds.
the FBI opened up, everybody else did. That's not. They don't practice what in the military you call fire discipline. It's one guy shoots and everybody starts shooting.
Yeah, sympathetic, what they call it, sympathetic fire. So they roused him out of bed one night, and he didn't know what was going on. He woke up his brother, who was right next to him, and telling him, "They're taking me, wake up, taking me, you need to listen to this and be able to document this some way as a witness." And he's shackled, and he's trying to hold on to a rail down these big, I guess they're concrete with metal edge steps, the way I heard it described. And they eventually threw him down these steps and really messed up his knee. However, Ryan Bundy is one tough guy. I can vouch for that. And they ended up taking him to the University of Oregon. They got kind of desperate. They were having a hard time finding doctors that would remove the bullet. So they took him to I think it was either Oregon State or University of Oregon, their medical department. And the doctor in training asked the right question: Are you going to allow us to remove this bullet? Is this something you want to do? And Ryan said no, and they said, well, we're not going to do it.
Good for him.
So 3 different times that took place, which it just goes to show the desperation, the level of desperation of the FBI and I guess even the Oregon State Police. I want to say one quick thing about the Oregon State Police. There was a major rift between them and the FBI. I don't think they realized it until later, but it was Mark McConnell who was outed by a Oregon State Police witness that was there, he outed Mark McConnell on the stand.
As an informant.
As an informant, yeah. So I just wanted to bring that up. So anyhow, there's all this exculpatory evidence. There's all this lack of due process, and it is so over the top that it's unbelievable. And I mean, I could spend hours talking about, because I spent 40 days in Oregon. I spent 4 months in Las Vegas, primarily out in front of the courthouse, but
Actually
also
going
inside.
through a lot of the discovery material.
Yeah, I've gone through a lot of discovery material. I actually accidentally ended up with a lot of the discovery
And that's a
material.
story in of itself, which we can't go into today.
Yeah, we can't go into it.
But what I do want to say real quick, because I don't want anybody to forget what part of the reason for this broadcast is, that Brand has been accused of being an FBI operative, and we're here to show. I'm going to ask him directly now. Brand, are the FBI DOJ corrupt?
As the day is long, they are so corrupt. It is unbelievable. Well, you just brought out something here. They want to reopen the case and go back after the Bundys. They are ruthless. They never give in and they never give up, and that's an important thing to understand because
Evil never does.
It never does. They will continue.
Yet they'll let murderers, drug dealers, their own agents get away with things all the time. Look at Hillary Clinton, for instance. Look what they're doing to her or not doing to her, and the damage she done. She may even have been responsible for the deaths of agents. Overseas, our agents overseas. So you have somebody like that they don't do anything to, and yet little people that are just trying to make a living every day and to take care of their families, they come in and ruin their lives and even kill them. So again, I'm going to ask you, Brand, are you an FBI informant?
I am not smart enough to be an
I wouldn't put it that way.
Absolutely not.
I would put it that way.
I want to... When I first heard about this, I'm not going to use the gal's name who came to me and told me there was another gal that I had a lot of respect for. I loved her dearly as a sister in the gospel. She, at the very moment I was testifying on the behalf of the Bundys in Oregon, she was out front, outside the building, telling everybody I was an FBI informant, and it was pretty devastating. It really hurt me deeply. But it really got me thinking. I was like, how could you even begin to think that? I just put my whole life on the line. I was threatened by the judge with arrest, and ultimately they did have an indictment for me, and to indict me up there in Oregon. I was like, how in the world can you come to this conclusion? So it did make me do a lot of thinking, and certain things came out, and I'm going to reiterate that. So everybody knows, full disclosure, there's no secrets here. I left the refuge on the 25th. I had to be in Vegas on the 26th. I had a court case going against a former employer of the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. I got all the paperwork, gives the dates and everything, my attorney, their attorney, and I had to be back on the 26th. And if I didn't show up on the 26th, the case would be dismissed. Plus, I'd owe $50,000 to the attorney's fees. Okay, so it's really important. I actually was hoping that it would be settled and I'd have some money to help out with the situation at the Malheur Refuge, donations or whatever. So I ended up leaving with a gal by the name of Melissa Lauder. Now, Melissa Lauder, for you that don't know, really was antagonistic to the whole thing at the Malheur Refuge. She's very antagonistic towards the Bundys, and she's even antagonistic towards me many times, and we've actually learned to get along a little bit. So we left on the morning of the 25th, and on the 26th...
Let me interrupt
you. Go
ahead.
ahead.
Steve Jones, you want me to X you out of here? You can't... I'm tired of people making accusations with no proof, okay? If you have some proof, stick it up here and show it to us. If not, you need to leave, okay? And anybody else who wants to continue making false accusations without evidence, get out of here, all right? We're tired of that. I'm not going to put up with it. All right? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So on the 26th, I was in the attorney's office and waiting for my attorney to show up. My attorney never even showed up, okay? So I went home and I was waiting for a call from Melissa Lauder because we were going to go back on the 27th. Now, mind you, I had a couple of vehicles there. and I had a lot of my own personal property there. And so on the morning of the 27th, she calls me, and somebody might say, why didn't you see this information on your phone? Why didn't you see it on your computer? Well, my computer was up there at the refuge. I did have my phone, but I was so tied up in other things with this court case that I never even saw it. Well, Melissa called me on the morning of the 27th. She goes, did you see what happened at the refuge? I go, no. And then that's when I got the news that LaVoy had been murdered, and all chaos was taking place there. So I told Melissa, I said, I got to get back. I got to get back right now. And she refused to take me. And I suppose I ought to end it right there, because the rest of the story is not applicable to what we're talking about now. But, when you see something like that, yeah, I left the refuge at a certain time. Now, here's some other interesting things. My son went up to the refuge to get my vehicle back. I wasn't going to go up there for sure. I figured I was going to.
Let's emphasize that. Yeah. When you left your vehicle there.
Yes.
Okay.
I came back with Melissa Louder. And so I had gotten information off Facebook that everybody's vehicle had been broken into. Shauna Cox, they broke out her windows on her vehicle. I think Ammon Bundy's his vehicle, the windows were all broken out. So I warned my son. I said, well, when you go up there, be prepared to see all the windows knocked out. And he took his father-in-law to drive one of the vehicles back. And I said, well, it's cold up there. Make sure you're dressed warm because the windows are going to be busted out. So you get up there. My vehicle is the only one they didn't bust out the windows.
See, you are an FBI fan.
Yeah, exactly. So I was actually really surprised. He texted me and goes, the windows are fine. And I was like, wow, okay, that's kind of interesting. But I didn't really think that much about it afterwards. Well, I was spending time in Cedar City for obvious reasons after that, and I got a call from my mother. And she got a call from her niece, and her son turned out to be Scott Ward.
And who is Scott Ward?
Scott Ward is my second cousin. He was an FBI agent that was to the Malheur to do the investigation at the refuge. So my mom's niece called, my mom's niece called her and was basically screaming at her that Brand was out here. He's involved with this stuff. Where is he now? Blah, blah, blah. My mom says, I don't know, and you don't want to know. And hung up the phone on her. So then my mom calls me, and I was like, that's the first time I ever heard this. I never met the guy in my entire life, okay? Look at me in the eye. I never met the guy. Still to this day, I've never met the guy in my entire life, okay? So I was like, wow, what are the coincidences? And I was like, I wonder if he's related to Dave Ward, Sheriff Ward, And it turns out he wasn't. But it was very, very disturbing. So fast forward a couple of years where you had the trial of Joseph Astorita.
The FBI agent that shot LaVoy Finicum and said that he didn't fire his weapon.
Yeah. So in that court...
Don't! FBI never lies!
It never lies about nothing. So in that case, it comes out that Scott Ward, my second cousin, was the senior member of the HRT. And I about fell over. I about had a heart attack when that came out. I was like, oh, no. I even called my mom and told her,
HRT is Hostage Rescue Team.
Yeah.
That's the team that Lon Horiuchi was on when he shot Vicky Singer. Well, that's another story. Vicky Weaver up there in Idaho. He was also at Waco. So he's a very bad guy. Nobody knows where he is. And I just have to interject that Bill Barr, who Trump has nominated to be his attorney general, helped to cover up the Lon Horiuchi murders at Ruby Ridge and at Waco.
So anyhow, you take all of this information, and as soon as I found out I called Sherry Duvall at Readout News, and I told her, I said, is this going to get out? This kind of stuff always does get out. And I said, do with it what you want. I said, just do with it what you want. She never did say anything about it that I know of. Okay? So, but if you take all this, a lot of people call it circumstantial evidence, and if you put it together, and that's what I did, I was like, oh, wow. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to really beat these people over the head anymore, because if it were me, I would probably think the same thing, you know. And it's actually bizarre.
I got to interject here
Go
because,
ahead.
like I said, I've known Brand for a long time, and if you want to kick me for saying this, you can. He does not like cops. I don't know why he ever befriended me. He does not like cops. There's no way he's going to work with them. No. So okay,
no, I'd rather die first. So anyhow, so that's that full disclosure. And I just one more thing along that lines. The people that took and ran with it later came back to me were people like Nathan Peters, people like a guy named by the name of Davy Crockett, and I just mentioned the other one. And Mark West. They took it and ran with it. You know, they're just keyboard warriors for the most part. Nathan Peters was actually at the refuge, though. But they're basically just keyboard warriors that, you know, they want some name recognition. Oh, look what I figured out, or look what I came up with, you know. And and it actually caused me a lot of grief. I lost a lot of close friends. I was became questioned, and people distanced themselves from me. And like John Lamb, he distanced himself from me because of this. And so that was very hurtful also, because I consider these very, very close friends, you know. So anyhow,
and I'm gonna have us change the subject here because we don't want to hold everybody here. But I wanted to make sure that Brand was able to get that information out. This, I don't know what you've written down there, but what I'd really like you to concentrate on, if you would, if you can, and that is the type of evidence that they suppressed at the Bundy trials. Okay. What types of things did they suppress? For instance, that really set the whole thing off was the BLM placing snipers up above the house with with rifles, with sniper rifles. Tell us about the types of things that they were trying to keep hidden.
Well, let's start with that right there. They had put up it's shaped like a football. And it's a camera that operates like 24/7, and they hit it. I guess there were several that they hit around the Bundys that came out that the defense knew about, and they kept trying to bring it out. And that was one of the things, because they're monitoring that ranch in the ranch house 24/7. The snipers was huge. Eric Parker repeatedly tried to get that information out. There were snipers, you know, at the time that Davy Bundy was arrested and beat up, and Ryan Bundy was there in his van with his family. And on the hill right there.
And this is before the demonstration started. But I am going to interject here real quick. And again, on the day of the standoff, the entire militarization of the DOJ, the FBI, and particularly the BLM, I think there were foreign contract officers on the BLM. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on that. But the point is, they were set up tactically with sniper teams in several locations. I named one, Mormon Mesa, observation post as well, which had not been there before the day of the standoff. So why, if they're going to release the cattle, and it was really funny, the morning of the standoff, I'm sitting there, watching the demonstration. I'm on the hill, and I would glass the area every day, kind of get an idea of what's going on. And I looked at that on Mormon Mesa, and I went, what the heck is that? It had not been there before. And I had these really good binoculars, and I looked up there, and I could see the observation post, and it was obvious that they had weapons up there. So why, if they were going to release the cattle? So in other words, this thing is a setup. Remember I said, they set up a situation so they can interpolate, they can inject intent when there is none. So I just wanted to bring that up real quick.
Well, thank you. Eric Parker repeatedly tried to get this information out, and one day it was amazing. When you had a few people up there like Stephen Stewart, Eric Parker, Todd Engel, and Ricky Loveland, who were on that the northbound I-15 and that bridge, and they were armed. Actually, Ricky Loveland was not armed, but Eric Parker became aware of the snipers that you're talking about.
Right.
That's why he went down the way he did, but he wanted to see what was going. So he put his rifle through the Jersey barrier there. Now, when you go out there, and if you ever look at that Jersey barrier, and I have the same rifle that Eric Parker has, and first of all, the barrel will not protrude to that 18 inches. It's only a 4-inch barrel,
Right.
you know. And Eric Parker was trying to say the reason he got down is because they were pointing
Weapons at him. In other words,
snipers at
without
him.
cause, they shoot first and ask questions later. The entire thing on police departments has been retrained to your safety is more important than the rest of the public. And I disagree with that. You put a badge and a gun on, and you should be willing to make that sacrifice because that's what you're called to do. But everything's changed now. But the real point here is, from the very beginning, even prior to the day of the standoff, the BLM were pointing weapons of war against unarmed people, men, women, and children. Not at the port arms, not ready, not slunging them, but pointing them at innocent, unarmed men, women, and children. That is an assault. I don't care if you're a police officer or not. You point a weapon at somebody like that, it's wrong.
Hair triggers. Well, Eric Parker on the stand, while he was being examined by the defense, he said, I cast my eyes up and to the right, and immediately the prosecution jumps up, object, the judge says sidebar, and so they go over to a sidebar, and they're over there for like 10 minutes discussing what Eric Parker just said, which in effect he really said nothing except for, see, the thing was, that's where the snipers was up and to his right, and they knew where it was going, and that's why the prosecution objected. And just prior to that, he said he had looked to his left, but he couldn't see anything. Well, why that is important. When I say he couldn't see anything, he couldn't see any federal agents. Why that is important is there was a federal agent, a woman, who was all the way a quarter of a mile down the road at the crossover. That's the crossover between I-15 North and I-15 South. Okay, and it's next to the compound. She says she could visually see Eric Parker pointing firearms at the BLM and the U.S. Forest Service, those agents. She could visually see it. So just prior to him talking about his looking up to the right, he was examined by the defense. What could you see to the left? And he said nothing but a hill, because she was on the other side of the hill. Okay, so she could not see. So she got on the stand and testified to this very thing, which means she committed perjury. So the next question is, what else could you see? Eric Parker said, I looked up and to the right, boom, sidebar, the prosecution, we object, they go over to the sidebar, they're for about 10 minutes, they come back, the judge sits down, and she looks at Eric Parker and she goes, you're done. And Eric Parker's like,
Wow.
Because it was so hard to even testify for yourself the way they were structuring everything. And Eric Parker's like, well, what's going on? And she goes, step down, you're done. And it was a very emotional, that was a very emotional.
That's when he broke down.
That's when he broke
crying?
down and the tears just started streaming down his face.
Because it was obvious that they were not going to allow the truth to come out.
Yes, and even
So they're not, the FBI and the DOJ are not about getting to the truth. They're about cultivating their careers by getting convictions even of innocent people. Okay? And by the way, there are only like 2 countries in the world that have the grand jury system, the way it's constructed here in the U.S., and it in and of itself is a corrupt system. I just wanted to say that, because you're never allowed to have your defense attorney into the grand jury to counter the crap that the prosecution is presenting. So we have a problem in our system, not to mention the fact that they now do not permit jury nullification, but that's another story as well.
Well, Eric Parker's attorney was so frustrated, and actually, I got to say, he looked depressed. And he just sat there. That was his defendant, and he just sat there, and it was his time to bring up, witnesses or whatever, testimony. And he just sat there. He's leaning back like this. His head is just down like this, and he's not responding to anything that's going on. Finally, the judge says, "Do you have anything else?" And he looked at the judge and he said, "Judge, you're making it impossible for me to defend my client." And really, it was very impressive. It was very impressive. So now, I think one of the biggest things that came out that we found out what the BLM and Dan Love had you're talking about a setup.
Mm-hmm, right.
Okay. This came out in the discovery and during the trial that they were trying to get the Bundys or anybody else that was there to support them to pull the pins on the gate. Now, if you remember looking at the video, somebody did kind of lift it up, and I think it was Dan Lowe said, whoa. That's actually what they had planned. They wanted somebody to pull the pins on the gate and open it, and they were going to consider that as a theft of the cattle. So they never at any time had any intention, of the BLM at least, of releasing those cattle.
And yet, what did Sheriff Gillespie told us at the demonstration?
Exactly.
Just the opposite.
You know, and they played that whole video during a trial of Gillespie speaking. And what was really interesting, Gillespie actually did say towards the end there, and we will talk about the cattle later. Okay, but what was interesting to me, you got this whole crowd there. He announces that the Gold Butte unit had been open, that the cattle are going to be released, and everybody's like excited, and you hear all this applause, and then like
I remember you going USA, USA,
and Gillespie says one other thing, but several octaves lower, plus with the crowd applauding and screaming. And we'll talk about the cattle later. Mm-hmm. Everybody missed that. Every witness that got on that stand and testified said, we never even heard that until they played it, that video, and then you could hear them. That was by design.
Oh,
absolutely, yeah. That was by design.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's, now look at it. Wanker, plutonium, Potter is fake. Guess what, mister or lady or whoever you are?
You're gone.
You're gone too. I'm not putting up with you guys, okay?
Yeah.
If you have evidence to accuse somebody of something, give it to me. I don't want to see that stuff. Do you understand me? You are demons. Demons falsely accuse the brethren. Knock it off or I'll throw you off of here. I don't put up with it anymore.
Well, I'll tell you how the lowlife, and I forget that FBI is Joseph something that testified against the Bundys. There's a couple FBI agents. There was a gal. And I need to back up a little bit. Steve Myrie, Dan Shees, and the FBI were there from the beginning, from the very moment that compound was set up. They were plotting and planning.
Very important to know this. Say that again.
They were plotting and planning.
Who was? Say it again.
The prosecution.
Before even what?
Before they even started round up the cattle. Before they almost did anything, assaulting Davy Bundy, everything. As soon as they got that compound set up with the trailers and everything, the prosecution was there working with the FBI, developing a plan to do whatever. Now, I truly believe at this time they had intentions of a huge massacre.
That was the whole plan.
Yeah.
It was to create a 9/11 event against patriots. We were always worrying about that happening, and that was the setup. That is coming, not just for me. And I was a professional military officer. I recognize things when I see it, and that is exactly what they were doing. They were setting up a mass slaughter, and to blame it on the American people, red-blooded American people that are out there trying to sustain their God-given rights under the protections of the Constitution.
Well, you also discovered that team of snipers that were coming in almost in the middle of all of us in the night in that mesquite bush.
Right.
And I actually went back there and I found how they set it up. How they had a bench in there where they could sit, and you could see shooting lanes, a whole 9 yards.
Right.
That thing was literally a few hundred yards from
It was just it was just across the river. Yep.
So this whole thing had been planned for a massacre, and we actually did a video about that whole thing when we got back into Vegas. So
and we were tired. I think we went on for too long, probably like we are here. But go ahead, yeah.
So. Kind of lost my train of thought there, but they in the court, all this stuff started coming out little by little. It's like pulling teeth. It's unbelievable. But the defense, in my personal opinion, I was really impressed with the defense. I know a lot of people weren't. But they were relentless. They tried every angle possible, and they were able actually get quite a bit out that the prosecution objected to continuously. The judge did everything she could to stop it, but things were coming out little by little. Just like I said, it was like pulling teeth, but they were coming out. I'm almost kind of lost for words of some of the other stuff. Maybe you could talk, and I'll try to remember some of the other stuff that came out.
Well, I'm not going to comment necessarily on what happened at the court cases because I wasn't there. All I know about them is what I saw in the news and a little bit from you and other people that would call me and tell me. But I want to again stress that this is nothing, that the Department of Justice has been, and the FBI have been doing this for decades, okay? And what you're seeing happen to Donald